Professor Yurgens, welcome to Scotland, welcome to Edinburgh. I understand this is not your first time in Scotland, but your first time in Edinburgh, so welcome. As you know, there's been a long tradition of Scotland-Russia relations dating back to Peter the Great, even earlier. In your view, what are the most pressing and urgent tasks in contemporary Russian-Scottish relations?
Oh, I think we have a great potential. We are two oil-producing countries. We have to think, by the way, as the resource economies, we have something in common. We have to think how those depleting resources could be put to better use. So upstream, downstream category of our thinking should be enhanced from my point of view. But of course, the scale is totally different. I think the cultural exchange, university exchange, technological exchange, engineering schools, all of this is very important, and we want to see more and more of Scots. You know, being from the Soviet Union, I can tell you that the organized exchange between Scotland and the USSR was much more dense. It included Robert Burns' annual meetings in Moscow on the literary and student side of it. It included much more intense exchange between the universities, so we have to restore that.
You're here to deliver the Erickson Lecture tomorrow. As you well know, Professor John Erickson was one of the preeminent specialists, preeminent military historians in the Cold War period, and it could be said that he helped even bring about, in his own way, the end of the Cold War. How do you feel about delivering this lecture, and if you could summarize the main points of what you might say?
Oh, I feel very proud because the people who spoke here before me, like George Robertson and Minister Rifkind, I know them and I know what kind of a caliber speakers they are and the positions they occupied in the public life and international life, making me their peer for this juncture. It's very important for me, and I'm very proud. The main points are, of course, the present state of affairs in Russia, economy, politics, social and public life, and what's in it for us in the future. Because we are 1 month away from very contested election, presidential election. Though the outcome is probably known, and we know whom probably the majority of the nation will win, will elect, nevertheless, it is contested because something started to move in Russian Federation, in Russian society, in Russian public life. So to tell it all to the audience, which I'm sure very well prepared and interested, it's pretty challenging and interesting.
Now, as you say, you come here at a very, very interesting time with the departure of Dmitry Medvedev from the presidency and the return of Vladimir Putin. If you were going to look back and evaluate the last 4 years, particularly in terms of one of your main themes, modernization, what would you say has been achieved in those 4 years?
Well, we started the process. We formulated the ideas. We put it in a book which was called Coalition for the Future. We made a program of 500 steps to be made in the direction of the modernization and more modern and contemporary Russian society. Unfortunately, I don't think that even one fraction was accomplished. Formulation of the program is a good thing, but practical results, I don't think that I can boast of much. Having said that, I don't think that 4 years of Medvedev were wasted years. Even if we speak about the reset with the United States at the time when everything went astray because of the Georgian War, even if we speak about the reset with the Polish Republic when around Katyn the issue of Katyn and those Polish officers who were massacred during the Second World War, it was a very serious showdown, both culturally and politically, and we crossed that very serious historical burden. Even if we speak about the reset with NATO, that's already enough internationally for any president to be proud of. But then internally, Mr. Medvedev started, though with the timid results, the fight which we all want to strengthen and to carry to fruition, the fight with corruption. Because this is the problem number one of the Russian society. This is the problem which creates autocracy, which regenerates autocracy in our society and kills the buds of democracy, which definitely exists in Russia. He started it, he didn't finish it. As I said, the results are timid and we're not satisfied with that, but the start was already a big thing to do. The concept of modernization formulated, some of the so-called innovative universities were formed and found. The schools, new schools of thought he tried to put on foot, and so on and so forth. So I think the results are mixed, but I would say that for 4 years which he was the president, a lot was done, which from my point of view would be a normal condition to run for the second term. For some reasons which will be known, I guess, in the future, he succumbed to pressure of Mr. Putin and decided not to run. I think it's a mistake. I think that the Russian opposition thinks it's a mistake, but we'll see the final result pretty soon.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that these elections are very contested and there's been recent protests in Russia. What, in your view, is the significance of these protests? Are they likely to have longer-term significance?
Yeah, it's a beginning. It's a beginning of the fight of the middle class for its rights. It's the beginning of the awakening of human dignity among Russian people who were preoccupied with their living and social conditions ever since the 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union. Russian people went through a lot of hardships. They delayed the political fight for their rights because Putin's administration delivered the standard and solid rise of the living conditions. So we were happy with the improving living conditions and sort of delegating to the powers of structures of power the political life. Now, no more. First of all, the crisis made a turnaround in the living conditions, and second of all, the social contract of population versus power is being reconsidered. And you cannot stop it because the middle class will be only growing. So the resistance to the autocracy will only grow in Russian society. But we see only the beginning of this process.
Okay. Now, do you think there's any way in which Mr. Medvedev's policies raised expectations which the return of Putin prevented in a way?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that the people who associate themselves with Medvedev and with his famous phrase with which he started his presidency, that freedom is better than non-freedom, these people feel betrayed a little bit. They feel that, first of all, as I said, Medvedev succumbed to Putin's pressure and joined his camp. And second of all, we feel the retrogradic movement, both in international politics of the Russian Federation and in political life. But I think that opposition, which showed its strength during 3 mass demonstrations at the end of the last year and the beginning of this year, puts things in the right perspective. Opposition is not strong enough yet to bring its own candidate to power, but already Putin feels that he should change.
You're widely seen as being very close to Mr. Medvedev, perhaps one of his closest advisors. Were you personally expecting there was a possibility he might run as, for a second term?
I was absolutely determined and sure, actually, that he should run. I had my doubts, judging by what was happening in another camp, in Putin's camp, that it will materialize. But until the beginning of September last year, I thought that we stand a chance. But then something happened. The obviously very frank, direct, and close to us conversation between the two bring the result which it brought. It triggered massive dissatisfaction and discontent in Russian society, and we see the results.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned earlier that the election result is more or less known. I suppose one of the biggest controversies will be whether there's a second round or not.
I would say that for the legitimacy of Putin, it would have been much better if he understands that even if he wins 50+1, and that is constitutional threshold which he had to cross to win in the first round, even if he wins 50+1, in view of what happened during the last fraudulent parliamentary election, nobody would accept that. I mean, nobody among those who are in the opposition. And why opposition is important? Because it's the most productive layer of Russian population. It's the middle class, it's intelligentsia, it's professorship, it's those people who really matter in terms of further development of the country. And if these people don't believe that the first round was honest, transparent, and objective, then the legitimacy of the whole presidency will be a big question mark with the consequences which Putin has to face in the future. So I would say that it's in his personal interest to have the second round, in which he has a very good chance to beat almost any candidate.
Mm-hmm. What would you expect from a third-term Putin? Is it possible that we'll see anything different?
Definitely, for his own sake, for the sake of the country, for the sake of the economy, he has to change. There are signs, judging by his massive meetings with his supporters, there are signs that he understands what's going on. There will be superfluous or profound changes in style. I have my doubts, though, that a person at 60 can change 180%, but let me give him a benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the last question, would you think that there's any prospect of the reset continuing under Putin, or is this likely to be more problematic?
I'm sure, again, it's in the egoistic interest of Russian elite, which is consolidated around Putin, that part of elite, to continue the reset with the United States and with the West. If they open up two fronts, with the liberals inside and with the West outside, then there is no chance that they can win or even sustain.
Professor Yurgens, thank you very much for coming to Scotland and giving us time to have this great interview with you.
Thank you for your hospitality and for your very interesting questions.
This production is brought to you by the University of Edinburgh.